Welcome back, everybody. It is the post-lunch duel. Listen, this session is going to fire you up. I know your stomach is probably, digesting all that food, but get the blood back to your brain, man, because this is going to be a fire session. We're talking about global. Jason Miller, if you caught the lunch session, was talking about how difficult it is to be a global marketer, how misunderstood global marketing really is. I think this session is going to dispel all the myths. No pressure, you two. But I'm really excited to hear from our next speakers because it's time to move B2B marketing beyond what they're calling point solutions. We need agile development, data management, and a world-class customer experience. No pressure. Our next two speakers are going to, unpack it all in 25 minutes. Sean Ma, Jennifer Comisford, or Jenny, we should say, Jenny from the block, get on here, get on stage now. Join me in welcoming them to the show. Sean Ma is Director of Strategic Advisory, and Jenny, I'm going to get your name. Okay. Senior Marketing and Tech Strategist at MarketOne. Quick shout out and thank you to our track sponsor, Merkle B2B. Off to you, but I will be back with some really hard-hitting questions from the audience in 25 minutes. Passing it on to you.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. Happy Thursday, everyone. Here's what's up. We're here to talk about CX. You've been at this event for a while. You've been in the market space for a while, all of that good stuff. I'm not here to actually define the problem. We know what the problem is. I'm also not here to talk about thought leadership. This is a real talk session about how do you actually stitch together a cohesive customer journey across all touch points in a way that makes sense. Not only that, but it's how do you achieve time to value in doing that? How do you actually make it a tangible element using data to drive your business to make pivots? But on top of all of that, wrap it in a way where how do you assist marketing to enable them to be excellent marketers without the distraction of engineering? That's what we're here for. So how we're going to do this today is Jenny and I are going to do this kind of like off the cuff, a little bit podcast style, where Jenny's going to represent the common challenges B2B enterprises face. I mean, we as an agency see that all the time, whether it's politics, multiple teams, distributed environments, all that good stuff. And I am playing the advocacy side of how you break those barriers down and actually come to a solution that's achievable.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. And thank you, Katie. If I wasn't energized and ready to go before, I certainly am now. So I appreciate that. Sean, so just to get us started off, look, like a lot of our clients, are talking about customer experience. It's become, the more prevalent word even over revenue generation or demand gen. Businesses recognize that to differentiate themselves from their competition, they have to deliver a superior customer experience. And that will ultimately result in dividends. And we know this, stronger ROI, more customer loyalty, increased market share. But look, like most organizations are not really structured to achieve this. You've got data being tracked in silos. We've heard that, throughout the sessions today and yesterday. But not only that, the systems that manage that data, the business processes that run off that data are all managed by different teams with different agendas, and they're all capturing customer insight in their silos that ultimately isn't being propagated across all the teams that are ultimately really engaging the same set of customers, the same individual. So, how do we overcome some of that, or at least find a place to start and get a little bit of common ground?
Yeah, let's dive into that. So like you just brought up a very nebulous subject, right? And what's on screen here, not the prettiest graphic, but I'm not sure it's where people's heads naturally go when you're talking about CXM. CXM, it's very easy to boil the ocean, right? There's a lot within this subject to tackle. And how do you actually make it in a way where you're achieving tangible yields along the way? And the reality is, look, at the end of the day, marketing, core to everything that we do, regardless if it's ABM, we're doing a CX focus or whatever you're doing, you have these three pillars. And I know we all know this, so I'm just going to talk about it very briefly. So Jenny, you brought up like distributed environment data and that sort of thing. That's exactly the challenge, right? Where yes, data is at the forefront of everything. You can measure digital body language. We know that. We also know that the measurement of is distributed between environments, right? You have web analytics competing with your marketing automation tools, competing with whatever other tools in your stack. We know that the marketing universe today is comprised of over 8,000 available platforms for use, right? So that's crazy. How do you actually find focus with that? And on top of that, you have your BI layer, which is intended to show the business where you're finding efficacy, what is performing, and monitoring what's in market, of course, right? And you wrap that all in operations. So the missing piece in the center, the 3 question marks is there actually a source of truth where all parties involved can converge, have a center of excellence for planning, monitoring, reviewing, and ultimately understand how to make pivots on the business? Once you achieve that, you will then attain a world where you can start to build on competitive advantage, right? So yes, it is a barrier problem, and I guess we can expound on that more as we continue. But the point here is CXM is rooted in data, BI, and operations.
So I feel like we've still kind of just been reiterating the things that everybody knows are the challenges and where they ultimately need to get to. You know, I'm a corporate marketer. It takes time to move the needle, and budgets are finite. Like, how do I actually start to achieve customer experience management?
Yes, so thank you. So this is what we're here for, guys. So let's dive into it, but let's just zoom out really quick, right? So we talk about BI, we talk about data, but what's lacking, and let's just give it a new term here. What's lacking is ultimately customer intelligence. And what I mean specifically by that is, yes, of course, you can monitor what your audience/customer is doing, but what's lacking is ultimately, is there context behind why those behaviors exist? If those behaviors lead to some beneficial business yield, why? What is spurring that level of engagement? Where does that engagement start? And how do you keep an audience actually continually interested in the content that you provide? How do you understand where there is value exchange and what you put into market for your end customers as you break it down into segments? So let's just set the stage with a very common example, right? So what's on screen here is super, super common. It's intended to represent someone can throw in a search term in your favorite search engine, right? They're going to hit a landing page and they can browse several pages within your site, right? So there's multiple impressions here, and that chat bubble at the end is intended to represent either a purchase or a form submission, basically a conversion, right? A conversion needs to occur if someone is originally unknown in order for them to be cookied and understood, hey, this is their email address, let's target them, right? I am going to use a B2C example just because it's a simpler example, something that everybody gets. So let's just make this real. So I am looking for a delivery meal kit, right? I just want ingredients, recipe, packaged to my home on a weekly basis. Cool. I look for that. I land on a site. On this site, I specifically narrow down to, okay, I want single pan meals, all right? And then also something low carb, something a little healthier, and specifically weekly serving size of 3 meals across 3 days, right? And of course I can hit the order button. Everybody knows that. What if someone doesn't hit the order button? This is the common limitation of most of marketing today, if specifically email marketing. If someone doesn't hit the order button, they're unknown. But the thing is, there's a lot of contextual information here that will inform how to engage with an unknown audience that's currently not in your marketing database, which of course is a huge opportunity cost, right? You need to grow a actionable database, grow interested parties, but also use this customer intelligence to inform within your actual marketable database, provide context to the business of how customers interact with content, what makes them tick, and within those segments within, what is actually most relevant to them, what's driving these behaviors. So here's the thing. All of these lead to very core elements of, let's call it an engineered data set. Because if you distill it down to the most common, most fundamental items that you can track within this interaction, it's what's on screen here. And what you're going to notice is all of these things are from really basic tools that exist today. So in no part in this conversation did I mention CDP. The point I want to set across here is anybody who's interested in making a transformation to chase the initiative of CXM, you do not have to make an extra investment in a CDP. Because at the end of the day, even if you had a CDP, you have to go down the exercise of standardizing data and engineering a data set that is machine readable and actionable for your transactional systems. Meaning, from this experience that I put on screen here, can you pull out signals from the noise to inform what is the next best action? So let's zoom into that, right? So you can see the parts that are highlighted in lighter blue are the notable activities that ultimately pinpoint what segments this particular experience falls into, right? So you can see, for example, someone came in from an AdWord and they were looking for mass delivery. So that might align to a particular campaign, but specifically the AdWord of delivery meal kit is what drove the interest here. And not only that, you can zoom in deeper into, hey, this is a party that might be strapped for time because they're specifically looking for something that's easy to cook, one pan meal, right? And they're also maybe a single household because they're only looking for 3 meals, but they're definitely health conscious because it's low carb. So basically all these things inform how do you go back and retarget a person, right? Or it can also inform within your entire mix, your repertoire of solutions and products, what is actually hitting certain demographics. Because identity data, even if you don't actually have contactable information, you'll actually be able to narrow down like locale, time of visit, what kind of browser they're using, device, and ultimately there's universal ad ID, so it gives you a lot more information that way. But anyway, long story short, all of these translates into actionable business insights that can drive what is the most appropriate thing to do next with this information. So
Sean, I was going to ask a question. What if I want to, I mean, obviously this is a B2C example, but how do I think about this in the context of account-based marketing, knowing that so many of the folks on the line are really thinking about trying to use this data, both in a individual targeted way, but also to understand what's happening at their accounts?
So this is especially relevant for ABM in that with accounts, we know that there are buying groups. With accounts, we also know that they can be in multiple buying cycles at once. So this is actually made more powerful because you are no longer constrained by monitoring your accounts and targeting them based on known activities of individuals you have in your database. At the end of the day, you're going to be able to aggregate an account activity even if they're unknown. And imagine a world where you can see in the totality of an account, all of the interactions with the content of all of your web properties, and then be able to break it down into specifically identify which buying cycles they're in, meaning which products they are interested in, and then within those products, which part of the buying journey do they fall, like early, middle, or late stage, right? And that metadata can then inform how do you go back and address what is the most appropriate thing to market back to an account based on the inferred activity and the context of what's going on. So you will see here, there's an interest score, for example, right? So that's a mathematical calculation of all possible things someone can be interested in. What is the thing that's going to yield the greatest propensity for a positive result as it relates to sales/marketing? But also you can have the scoring process to determine where an account falls as you aggregate all of these activities in the purchase cycle. So therefore, it allows you to retarget and retarget not as in that particular tactic, but how do you segment your database and allow marketing to do what marketing does best? Meaning content is still king. Let's move away from this engineering heavy environment and enable an environment where these data sets, again, it's an engineered data set. So the intention is this actually produces a segment that feeds into marketing transactional systems and suggests, hey, here's a group of people interested in X, and this is the part of their buyer journey, right? So now you have this augmented suggestion that can drop into pre-existing always-on programs to activate on.
So you've started talking about, well, actually, I know we have, Sean, we have the example of how this would actually come to life. If you want to go ahead and pull that, show that guy our very, very fun attempt at coming up with an ad creative. Talking about all of this stuff, Sean, I mean, we are in the thick of it in terms of data engineering and technology configuration and really designing, like, how do I translate this super nice like metadata structure that you are recommending into something that a content marketer or corporate communications marketer is going to be able to actually understand and plan campaigns against and activate?
Of course. So let's throw more context into that question, because at the end of the day, we're talking about CX, right? And we know what's on screen here. It's a buyer journey. But the point I want to make here, and I think everybody in the room recognizes, is that the buyer journey is non-linear. Human behavior is completely random. Okay. So if human behavior is random, why do we live in a world where we are trying to force prescription of what a customer experience should be to individuals and accounts? That doesn't make sense, right? This is the conversation. This is actually, how do you actually make marketing more tangible, easier, but also allow for a very targeted choose your own adventure, so that every interaction, every individual who partakes in the consummation of content with your brand has a distinct and unique experience. And so what I want to show on screen here is like, look, we know this purchase journey cycle. Underneath, if you're a more mature organization, you are very likely to have sub-segments within each category. These sub-segments ultimately inform monitoring of the business, where people are falling, and secondarily, planning. How do you go to market and capitalize on opportunities that you see here within the matrix, right? This buyer journey matrix. But here's the thing, again, human behavior is random. And the point I'm trying to make here is someone can start at any point here. They don't start and end in the same place. In fact, you can even flow backwards. So how do you actually enable an environment where that's possible? So Jenny, that's where you're going, right? So we know this. Communication needs to be more modular, meaning this is the thing I have on screen here. This is kind of like a more old school nurturer, where you're forcing like, this is a communication path. We're going to hit you with many touches. There's no end in sight, and you fatigue your database. We know this, right? So what if we move back to that choose your own adventure scenario, right? Modular communications. And I'm using communications as a term specifically. And what you see on screen here is vehicle, right? So what I'm trying to represent is you can have content that's aligned to every part of the buyer matrix. And that's all it is. It's content. You are not forcing a specific structure of how that experience should be. So what that means is you have content that exists that are quick touches. You can have 1 to 2 touches, maybe 3, to respond to an event and that account did, that maybe was suggested by this tool that you're building to capitalize on a particular event that occurred, right? So what modularity of communications means is, instead of really prescribed programs, you have really quick, like drip 2-touch programs, or even 1 touch. So you'll see here in this example, it's literally 1 communication to go back to engage an individual or an account. And if they engage with that communication after a set period of time, cool, send them a second one, see if it happens, but then stop there, that's it, it's done. Human behavior is both random and short attention span, right? So you just hit them once, hit them twice, they're done, and they're gonna come back and re-interact with your brand. And as they re-interact, they may end up at a different spot, and then they're gonna receive content that's more tailored to where they are suggesting they are to be, if that makes sense. So that's more like choose your own adventure. Someone can end up wherever they may be on this matrix, and an organic experience can be achieved.
What if this, so this segmentation model, this customer journey segmentation model is pretty granular. And I think some folks might argue that, their business model, their purchase cycles don't necessarily warrant this much, this degree of segmentation. Like, how do is this modularity, this concept of modular communication still possible if I don't go quite this granular with my segmentation?
And I guess that's the beauty of it. And the main thing to important with CX is that you don't go into CX just to create a fancy customer experience. That's not the point, right? It needs to be rooted in some focus area. So for a particular business, it can be addressing the fact that, hey, you know what, of the entire universe that a business sees that's trackable, maybe only 10% of that tracked activity is actually known. So what if the business can action the conversion of unknown to known to increase pipeline, increase market reach, and that sort of thing? So that ultimately begins with doing a content mapping exercise, and that ultimately determines what is going to be most feasible as a first step to chase down this CXM initiative.
So I know you mentioned earlier that a CDP isn't a requirement, but what technology are we talking about here? Because we know that, from being in this business and working with the clients that we do, that everybody's technology stacks are, first of all, oftentimes Frankenstein at this point, but also, vary in maturity, even if they have all the core pieces. How they're actually using them and how well integrated they are varies. So how do I make this work into the average B2B MarTech stack?
Right, very fair question. So we've made this work on a shoestring budget, and let me show you what's next. So to go back to the single view of customer, it needs to be defined for CXM, and single view of customer for CXM is very specific, targeted metadata that ultimately can inform how a business can re-interact with an account or individual that has done some things, right? And so this looks a lot like the previous data set I showed, but it's more categorized. And what you see here is there's nothing special inside these tools. You see web analytics, right? So like Google Analytics. You're going to see CRM in here because CRM ultimately can inform purchase history. Purchase history can impact forecasting. Maybe you're going to monitor and measure CLV and how to monitor that. So meaning cross-sell, upsell situations, there could be a time component to how long an organization has a particular product solution and when they will need to jump onto something different, right? You will also have a marketing automation platform, very likely. So in here, you're going to be able to look at what's tracked by marketing automation to inform what to do next, right? And ultimately decisioning, and that's where the heavy piece is. Decisioning will come from data that comes from a tag management platform or CMS. And should an organization have access to a data mart, you can then insert those business rules to produce an environment where you can recast these segments and suggest, hey, this is the program they fall into. This is how we're going to enable an always-on automated situation with modular communications cross-channel, right? This is not isolated to email, and allow for that. So the data mart just needs to plug into all your transactional tools. So in no part in this conversation, as I said before, did I mention CDP. You can do this with just what's on screen. And in fact, we've helped an organization achieve this without a data mart and still have the same level of functionality and grew to major success for them in a quick amount of time.
So the examples that we've been talking about have been primarily digital, and even just the data that you're showing on this screen are is related to UTM capture and CMS or web tagging. How does offline data actually factor into this model, knowing that one day we will go back to having in-person events?
At the end of the day, offline data always factored into the model. Regardless of what offline data you are talking about, a marketing team at the end of the day is going to take offline interactions and push them to transactional platforms, right? Whether that means it's only for BI purposes or for lead management purposes. Specifically, why I'm bringing this up is those offline activities will also similarly have some form of taxonomy that inform what happened, whether that's lead source information or specific event information. That kind of data still goes in here that can inform this engineered data set where you can then apply machine learning to model what to do next. And again, like this doesn't even need machine learning. It can work on its own with your business rules to calculate what to do next based on levels of engagement and where they fall on the buyer journey.
All right, awesome, Sean. If you want to go to the final slide, we wanted to make sure that we had some time to talk through really like, okay, how do you actually go and do this if you are interested in trying to take this on within your organization? And then, of course, make sure that we have time for questions at the end. So I'm going to cover the kind of 4 key takeaways or next steps for you if you want to embark on this within your organization. If you happen to hear my Yorkshire Terrier barking in the background, I apologize. Such is life of virtual event presentation from our homes. But really the The first and one of the most important things here is to identify and prioritize your use cases. This will be a very, very hard mountain to climb and overcome if you do not seek more specificity than we want to be able to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time, or we just want to be able to predict what the next best action should be for someone, regardless of what that might be. You really want to get specific here in terms of what are the key kind of touch points or interactions that customers typically have with your organization that you want to influence, what channels you want to prioritize first, and define some really specific goals. We've all heard the term SMART goals, but there's warrant in that term of making sure that something's time bound, relevant, measurable, achievable, and specific enough that you can actually report out on the results. So this really accomplishes a few things. One is it puts some guardrails around the scope of your proof of concept to make sure that it can actually be achieved in a reasonable amount of time. It also forces the organization to think through what is going to have the biggest impact. And it starts to get, everybody involved aligned to and agreeing upon what you ultimately need to achieve. In terms of, segments and figuring out who to test this against, I have a Venn diagram icon here because in our mind, it really is literally a Venn diagram of comparing where you have the best content, where you have the most content, and where you have the largest marketable database. 9 times out of 10, doing this quick analysis of content mapping exercise and recognizing the quality and the volume of various segments within your database, this is going to ultimately result in you identifying the audience to go after first. In terms of engaging teams, embarking on this with clients, it is one of the most common pitfalls that we see in terms of folks not putting enough time and energy into defining the plan of how they're actually going to take everyone else on this journey with them and make sure that your key stakeholders are on board. So we've listed, the key teams that are typically involved in this work here, from your web team, analytics, IT, BI, that may or may not sit with the IT organization, demand generation, marketing operations, even sales. Putting a change management, the dreaded term change management, but putting a change management and plan in place and defining how you're going to ultimately engage your stakeholders in this evolution is key. One strategy may be to bring key folks from each of these teams into that exercise of identifying and prioritizing use cases so that they have a good understanding of what is being trying to be achieved, and what you're ultimately going to chase after. And then the last and certainly not least component here is defining really your phase one, share of voice or single view of customer. Pardon me, getting my marketing acronyms confused. Your single view of customer data strategy put together. And so this isn't just what you're going to track, because obviously we've been showing some examples of things that you may want to track, but this is actually, how can it be standardized, normalized, made machine readable? Where are there opportunities for potentially enriching, whether it's first party enrichment or third party enrichment, and where this data is actually going to be housed, if you don't have a data mart, you may need to build out some of this taxonomy and metadata within your marketing automation platform or within your CRM in order to make it available for use. And then ultimately, what are going to be the activation platforms that get access to that data, and how does that data get fed into those systems? And, nobody's data is completely complete or completely clean. So we're just looking for a, minimum viable scenario here. But if you do identify that you've got some major gaps from a data quality standpoint, that is really where you're probably going to have to start, before even getting into, creating that single view or defining use cases to implement and activate against, is really making sure that you have that minimum viable set of at least a few data points that start to tell you a little bit about your customers, that is unified and not fragmented. And I think, Katie, that is it. If we're ready to move into, oh, Sean, you're right. I missed one slide.
Oh no, that's okay. That's okay. Like we have a lot more content on this subject, and we'll circulate this. But these are articles, podcasts, how to do's on these subjects. But at the end of the day, the point we want to get across is single view of customer does not need to be complicated. You're actually working with a very small, focused, defined data set. That data set drives modular communications. So move away from heavy engineering and outbound marketing into something that's more organic, that allows individuals to free flow through your content. And then you have a BI layer on top of that, and you're going to be able to see how effective it is and continue to do CRO and what marketing does best.
Easy, simple, right? Totally easy. Sean, Jenny, thank you both. We do have a couple questions, and I have a really important one first, Jenny, that comes from me. It's, what is the name of your Yorkshire Terrier, please?
His name is Jack, and he's 15 years old, and he's toothless. So most of the time his tongue is hanging out of his mouth, and he also sleeps most of the day. So of course he picked the best time to.
If you don't tweet me a photo of Jack, I will be extremely disappointed. No, I have a real question. And it's we have such a short amount of time that the answer will never do it justice. But somebody asked a great question about our move to first-party data. How is the cookieless data environment going to impact how we aggregate this profile data?
Yes, so ever more important for ABM. With cookieless information, you are still going to be able to aggregate activities to an account and produce those insights to how to hit an account. So then the focus then becomes, how do you move records that are not cookied, so mostly unknown, and get a transaction so that they're in a database so that you can do something with that record. And on the media side, there's more importance there, right? Meaning there's a lot more weight on driving inbound marketing to manage your CX. So your media buys, syndicated content, retargeting initiatives, those will all be very important. And of course, social.
One of my favorite quotes that you said today, Sean, is that we like to think the buyer journey is linear, but it is in fact a choose your own adventure. And I really love that. I tweeted it out. So thank you for that tweetable moment. And thank you both for such actionable. I really appreciated the level of detail that you got into today. It's a fantastic look as as we keep evolving, the world keeps forcing us to change. Any final thoughts for the audience? We got about a minute left. Any final takeaways, tips, or more information about Jack?
No, I mean, I think, we're all about testing and learning and getting your hands dirty and just, start small and get some wins and then go from there. So that's definitely our approach, and we promote that with our clients.
How about you, Sean? Any last thoughts?
That would be it. There's a lot in test and learn for sure. Yeah, that's it.
Always be learning. I love that. What is that quote? It's like you either win or you learn, right? There's no failure. You'll learn something. This is turning into a talk show, you guys. It's very Oprah-like. We're going to inspire the audience here now. I really appreciate you both. MarketOne, check them out. I have benefited a lot from your content over the years, and you continue to put out just really cutting-edge stuff. So thank you both for being here, giving us a sneak peek into it in 25 minutes or less. I want to encourage all of our attendees, please don't forget to check out the expo. There are so many prizes being given away that I am overwhelmed by it. So go get your prizes. Jenny, Sean, thank you again. If there was an audience here, you'd hear the applause. You'd be deaf from all the applause that you'd be getting right now. Excellent session. Well done. We're going to keep the train moving on this CX track, everybody. Our next session is going to start in just a couple minutes, and we will see you there. Thank you both again.
Thanks, Katie.